You scroll through your feed, hundreds of faces, smiling, laughing, celebrating, moving, living, yet none of them feel close. None of them see you. You could vanish tonight, and the world would keep scrolling endlessly. No pauses, no questions. Just a flick of the thumb and you're gone. Strange, isn't it? You're more connected than any human being in history. You can send a message across the world in seconds, share your life with strangers, and collect hearts and likes like coins in an arcade. And yet, beneath the glow of the screen, a hollow ache sits quietly in your chest. You might not even notice it anymore. It's become normal, that sense of being unseen, untouched, unknown. You smile in public, speak in meetings, maybe even go to parties. But something is missing, something ancient, something sacred. This is the paradox of our time. In a world bursting with noise, we are drowning in silence. In a world obsessed with followers, no one is truly following. In a world of endless communication, no one hears you when you cry alone in your room. Why is it that even as cities grow denser, our hearts grow colder? Why even as technology bridges distances, our souls drift further apart? Why has the very fabric of our shared humanity begun to unravel? Quietly, invisibly, thread by thread. You feel it in your bones, don't you? That vague ache, that emptiness that no achievement, no notification, no relationship seems to truly fill. It's not depression, not exactly. It's not anxiety, not entirely. It's something deeper, something nameless. Call it disconnection, call it spiritual starvation, or perhaps call it what it really is, loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being alone. Solitude can be sacred, but the kind that comes from being unseen, unfelt, unloved. The kind of loneliness where you're surrounded by people, yet starving for real connection. The kind that makes you feel like a ghost in your own life, half present, half forgotten. What if this isn't just your problem? What if this is the silent epidemic of our age? One not caused by viruses but by absence, not by illness but by indifference, not by death but by the slow erosion of meaning, community, and care. What if the greatest health crisis of the 21st century isn't physical, but existential? This loneliness, your loneliness, isn't random. It's not a glitch in the system. It is the system. But how did we get here? When did our shared humanity become so fragmented, so commodified, so optional? And more urgently, can we find our way back? The answers lie deeper than you think, buried beneath psychological wounds, philosophical betrayals, and the slow corrosion of modern life. But before we can reclaim connection, we must first understand what broke it. Let's go there. You were not born lonely. You came into this world screaming, raw and unprotected, immediately reaching, searching for warmth, for safety, for someone. Your very first instinct was connection. But somewhere along the path of growing up, something shifted. Not just for you, for all of us. Modern society didn't teach you to belong. It taught you to compete. From your earliest memories, you were evaluated by grades, by looks, by popularity. You were measured not for who you were, but for how well you performed. Love became conditional. Attention had to be earned. Affection became a currency, not a given. The inner child, still alive in you, knows this wasn't how it was meant to be. But society, in its relentless machinery, taught you otherwise. It seduced you into believing that independence was strength, that vulnerability was weakness, and that needing others was shameful, that the only way to be worthy of love was to need nothing at all. And so you hardened. You learned to hide your needs, to silence the voice inside that begged to be seen, to bury your hunger for connection beneath layers of irony, distraction, and overachievement. You crafted a persona strong enough to survive a world that no longer remembers how to care. This is not a personal failing. It is the result of a deeper sickness. As Gabor Maté observes, modern culture values striving and self-sufficiency over connection and authenticity. We raise generations to prioritize productivity over presence, perfection over wholeness. We shame the very emotions that are central to bonding: sadness, fear, longing, tenderness. But even deeper still, there's a philosophical fracture. In the West, we inherited a worldview, Cartesian, individualistic, mechanistic, that sees the self as separate from the world, the mind as separate from the body, the human as separate from the tribe. Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am." But what if that declaration quietly severed us from something primal? What if the real truth is, "I am felt, therefore I am"? Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism spoke of the anguish of freedom, the unbearable weight of a self, detached from meaning, from others, from God. Aldous Huxley warned us that we would be sedated into isolation, not with oppression, but with pleasure, that our loneliness would not feel like pain, but numbness, the soft, slow death of meaning. And here you are, living that prophecy. Because loneliness in our time is not just social. It's spiritual, it's philosophical, it is the product of a world that has forgotten soul, story, and sacredness. Even Carl Jung saw it coming. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." In other words, when your truth goes unheard, yourself begins to disappear. You live in a world where small talk is safe, but depth is dangerous, where you can talk for hours without ever touching a real feeling, where performance has replaced presence, and where the person you show the world is increasingly a hologram, not a human. And every time you silence your need for connection, you participate in your own vanishing. But it doesn't end there, because this loneliness, born from a wounded culture, doesn't just stay inside you. It spreads. Like a quiet virus passed from soul to soul, a mother too exhausted to be present, a father too wounded to speak his truth, a friend who's afraid to say, "I miss you." What began as a personal ache has now become collective amnesia. We've forgotten how to belong. And the most terrifying part? We don't even realize it. We've normalized it. We call it independence. We call it adulthood. We call it success. But underneath those words, there's a buried grief, a grief for what we lost, and perhaps for what we never had to begin with. The question now isn't just why we feel lonely. The question is, what kind of world did we build that makes loneliness inevitable? And worse, what are the consequences of staying asleep in it? Let's find out. You tell yourself you're fine. You have a job, a screen full of notifications, a streaming queue that never runs dry. You check your inbox, your feed, your calendar. The silence of your heart is drowned in the noise of activity. But deep down, something aches. That ache is loneliness, but not the kind you can admit. This isn't just about sitting alone at lunch or not having weekend plans. This is something far more invisible, more insidious. A loneliness that lives in crowded rooms and thriving careers. A loneliness that wears a smile, that says, "I'm just tired," that scrolls through the lives of others and wonders silently, "Why do I feel like a ghost in my own?" This epidemic isn't loud, it's quiet. And that's what makes it so dangerous. The unseen consequence of modern loneliness is that it rewires how you see yourself. Day by day, you begin to believe you are somehow defective, unlovable, forgettable, and then, worst of all, unnecessary. When connection becomes scarce, you start to question your very existence. You might think this is dramatic, but studies on chronic loneliness reveal something sobering. It doesn't just affect the mind, it changes the brain. Prolonged isolation activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. It increases stress hormones, weakens the immune system, and shortens life expectancy. Some neuroscientists even argue it's as harmful as smoking, 15 cigarettes a day. But that's just biology. The deeper damage is existential. When you are unseen for long enough, you begin to disappear to yourself. You stop dreaming out loud. You stop sharing truth. You stop risking vulnerability. You curate your personality to be safe, to be acceptable, to avoid rejection. You show the world a palatable version of you, but inside, the real you is starving. And society encourages this starvation. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness, masks, and filtered perfection. Vulnerability is considered weakness. Neediness is stigmatized. Tenderness is commodified into aesthetics, nice to look at but never to feel. In a world where image is currency, authenticity is bankruptcy. And so we shrink. We say we're just tired, not broken-hearted. We say we've been busy, not deeply disconnected. We accept shallow interactions because they're easier, safer. We avoid silence because it threatens to show us what we've been running from. The fact that we don't feel known. This slow erosion of self bleeds outward into families, into friendships, into communities. We don't raise our children to be emotionally literate. We don't ask our friends real questions. We don't look strangers in the eye. We ghost people when we feel overwhelmed. We keep things casual. We talk in emojis. We pretend we're fine. But underneath the facade, we are starving for each other. The consequences are everywhere, yet barely discussed. Look at the rise in anxiety, depression, addiction. These are not isolated issues. They are symptoms of disconnection. Gabor Maté often points out that addiction is not about pleasure, but about pain. And the deepest pain, he says, is disconnection. From self, from others, from life. And so we turn to false gods to numb the ache. Dopamine hits, scrolling, overworking, shopping. Porn, noise, anything to distract us from the haunting feeling that we don't matter, that we're unseen, that no one would really miss the real us, because no one really knows us. Loneliness isn't just a feeling, it's a fracture in the soul, a fracture so normalized that we barely notice it anymore. But what if this is the root crisis of our time? Not climate change, not AI, not politics, but this, the collapse of connection. What if all our other problems are symptoms of this one silent sickness? And what if healing this wound doesn't start with more talking, but with learning to see again? Because here's the truth, loneliness doesn't thrive in solitude. It thrives in blindness, in a world where we've stopped looking into each other's eyes, stopped listening with the heart, stopped showing up with our full, messy, honest selves. We were never meant to be this alone. And yet here we are. The next question is, what can we do about it? How do we break the spell? Let's go deeper. It starts with a whisper, a faint but undeniable longing that flickers beneath the noise of daily life. You've felt it before, haven't you? In moments of stillness, in the silence that follows, scrolling endlessly through your phone, in the aching realization that despite all the likes, comments and constant digital presence, no one truly sees you. The rebellion begins there, quietly, not as an outward protest, but an inner awakening. To escape loneliness in a world designed to perpetuate. It is not a casual act, it is an act of defiance. Against algorithms, against speed, against superficiality, against the industrial machine that profits off your isolation. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The world is not built to connect you. It is built to distract you. Breaking free requires more than seeking connection. It requires relearning how to be human in a system that has made you forget. And the first step, you must become intimate with your own solitude. That's the paradox. To overcome loneliness, you must learn to be alone, not in bitterness, not in longing, but in reverence. Can you sit with yourself without distraction? Can you witness your own mind, your own pain, your own forgotten desires, without running from them? Because in those moments, you reclaim something that has been stolen from you, your depth. And without depth, no connection can be real. Gabor Maté said, "The essence of trauma is disconnection from the self." Loneliness then is not just a lack of others, it is the echo of your own absence. You've been missing from your own life, so you return. You begin to engage with others, not through performance or pretense, but through presence. You stop asking, "How do I make people like me?" and start asking, "What happens if I show up as I truly am?" And what happens at first is terrifying. You may be met with silence, with misunderstanding, with rejection, but you will also discover something else. The rare and sacred alchemy of real connection. The kind that doesn't come from small talk or shared memes, but from vulnerability, eye contact, attention, listening not just to respond, but to understand. You will realize that most people you meet are lonely, too, but they've been hiding it behind busyness, humor, sarcasm, ambition, and your courage gives them permission to drop the mask. Rebellion is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like sitting down with someone and asking, "How are you really?" And waiting and staying, even when the truth is messy. Sometimes it means putting down your phone in a room, full of people who haven't, choosing discomfort over numbness, risking awkwardness for the sake of something real. It means becoming the kind of person who listens before speaking, who sees before judging, who reaches out first, even when it feels scary. Because connection isn't convenient, it's courageous. This rebellion demands new rituals, slowing down, creating spaces of intentional presence, will lead speaking truth even when your voice shakes, remembering birthdays, writing real letters, making meals for people you love, or sitting in silence without the need to fill it. It means cultivating micro-communities in a macro-lonely world, circles of truth, spaces of safety, environments where masks are not required and silence is not shamed. Yes, you will lose some things in this rebellion: efficiency, social polish, the illusion of control. But you will gain something far greater, a life that feels alive. You weren't made to be a consumer of relationships. You were made to belong, not just to others, but to the moment, to the earth, to yourself. And once you taste that again, once you feel it in your bones, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. Because what the world calls loneliness is often just the hunger for what is real. And this rebellion, it's not about fixing yourself to be worthy of connection. It's about remembering that you already are. But there's one final layer, one deeper truth, one realization that changes everything. And that is where we must go next. There comes a moment, a silent, staggering moment, when you realize that loneliness was never just about being alone. It was never just about people leaving you, not texting back or not being invited. It was something deeper, something older, something spiritual. It was the illusion that you were ever separate to begin with. You see, the modern world has fed you a lie so subtle, so persistent, that it became the foundation of your identity, that you are an isolated self, drifting alone in a meaningless universe. But you are not a fragment. You are not a mistake. You are not a solitary unit of consciousness trapped in skin and bone. You are connection itself. From the moment you were born, connection was the first language your body spoke. The warmth of your mother's skin, the rhythm of her heartbeat, the way your tiny fingers instinctively reached for something beyond yourself, something to hold, to anchor, to belong to. This is not sentimentality. It is biology. It is spirit. It is the ancient truth, forgotten by modern man. You are woven into a fabric far greater than you, and the great sickness of our age, this epidemic of loneliness, is not just a social crisis. It is a metaphysical rupture, a dismembering of soul from soul, being from being, self from source. We have built entire civilizations on the scaffolding of separation, economic systems that pit us against one another, technologies that simulate intimacy while deepening disconnection, ideologies that reduce us to roles, numbers, and identities. We have become strangers in a crowded world, and worse, strangers to ourselves. But here, in this realization, something begins to shift. A crack forms in the illusion. You begin to see what the mystics have always seen, that behind every pair of eyes is the same sacred longing, that every tree, every animal, every person is not other, but another part of you. Loneliness then was not your enemy. It was your guide. It brought you to the edge. It showed you what happens when we forget who we are. And now, standing at that edge, you have a choice. You can numb it, drown it, distract it, or you can step into a new way of being, a remembrance, a return. To look at the stranger and feel your own heart tremble. To sit with a friend, say nothing, and feel known. To walk through a forest and sense, not imagine, but know that the trees see you too. To realize that you don't find belonging. You are belonging. It doesn't require perfection or worthiness or social status. Only presence, only willingness, only the courage to see what was always there. This is the final truth. You were never alone. You just forgot where to look. And now you remember. And that changes everything. So when the loneliness returns, and it will, don't run. Don't shame it. Welcome it. Sit with it. Ask it what it's trying to show you, because it is not your enemy. It is the aching of the soul reminding you, come home. Home is not a place. It's not even a person. It's the moment you stop pretending to be separate. It's the moment you remember that every heartbeat, every breath, every tear, every touch is part of something vast, tender, and eternal. It's the moment you realize you were always held, always connected, always loved. You didn't lose your way. You were being led. And now you are found.